Today's sermon is titled The Nobel Prize, Gold Standard or Popularity Contest, and will be delivered by Joel Cehn. The sermon today centers on the fourth principle. We affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And the sixth principle, we affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Joel is a native of Waterbury, Connecticut. He moved to Cambria in 2011 after many years living in the San Francisco Bay Area. After attending colleges in Massachusetts and North Carolina, he worked as a physicist, measuring pollution levels in the workplace and in the environment. He still consults to clients who are concerned about environmental safety. He has a daughter, Michelle, son-in-law, Dan, and a grandson, Graham. He's trying to retire completely from work and spend more time lawn bowling, bicycling, and building and flying model airplanes. Although frankly, I can't see how that's possible, but please welcome Joel.
Thank you, Janet. I really enjoyed researching this topic and learning about the history of the Nobel Prize and the many amazing people that have won the prize in various categories. And learning about their stories, their lives and their stories, and I want to share some of those stories with you this morning. The other thing I enjoyed was looking at the quotations, the wonderful quotes from Nobel laureates. And we heard a few this morning already. We heard the words of Martin Luther King, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1963, I believe, 64. We heard the words of Bob Dylan, the songwriter, who not too many years ago, won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And another quote comes to mind. This is a little more lighthearted than some of those heavy quotes. This one goes, this Nobel laureate has said, if this be a world of vice and woe, I'll take the vice and you can have the woe. I'm not going to reveal who said that for a few minutes. We'll get back to that quote in a few minutes. First, I want to talk about the history of the prize and Alfred Nobel, who created the Nobel Foundation. Alfred Nobel was a chemist. His father was a chemist. His brother Emil was a chemist. Came from a family of chemists. But Alfred Nobel was a very clever chemist and inventor. He was Swedish. He had 355 patents for inventions in the Swedish Patent Office. And his most famous invention was dynamite. And dynamite was something that was, let me back up. In order to blast in mining or in road building or in certain types of construction, you had to use very dangerous chemicals. And the most prominent one was nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin was a very dangerous chemical. It was a liquid. You had to carry it around in a little glass jar. And if you dropped the jar, it would most likely explode and most likely kill you. So blasting was a very dangerous profession. In fact, Alfred's brother Emil was working in the laboratory with nitroglycerin. The chemical prematurely exploded and he was killed. So Alfred Nobel was motivated, to say the least, to do something about this. And he worked on the invention of something that was a safe blasting agent. And he came up with dynamite, his most famous invention. Dynamite what he did was he absorbed nitroglycerin onto an inert material. And so you had a stick of dynamite, you could drop it, you could hit it on the table, it would not explode. It was much safer than the previous materials. And he went further than that. He came up with a way of exploding the dynamite with an electrical charge, which was much safer than lighting the fuse and running away. So he made blasting a very safe occupation, and the customers what's the expression, beat a path to his door. He created a factory to manufacture dynamite. He sold a lot of dynamite, and he made a lot of money. Well, one day, let's fast forward to the late 1800s. He opened the newspaper, and he saw this headline. Andy, if we could show us the headline. The Merchant of Death is dead. Well, Alfred Nobel looked down, and he said, well, I'm not dead. But he quickly realized that there was a mistake. His brother Ludwig had recently died. We can have that headline. Ludwig Nobel died of natural causes, his older brother. But he realized that was the mistake, and of course he corrected it. The other mistake that the newspaper made was that he was not the Merchant of Death. As I explained, dynamite made blasting much safer. Dynamite saved lives for people that were in the blasting industry. But so the reporter got a number of things wrong on that. And a very smart person once said, don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. That was not a Nobel laureate. That was my grandfather who said that. Well, Nobel was troubled by the take on the treatment he was given in his phony obituary, and he vowed to do something about that. He wanted to be remembered as someone who improved the life of his fellow man, and he changed his will. He had no children, he was not married, he had no family. So he created, in his will, he said, my fortune will go to the Nobel Foundation to award prizes to individuals that have worked for the betterment of mankind. He died in 1896, and his fortune at the time, in today's dollars, it's estimated his fortune was $250 million. And that went into the Nobel Foundation for the creation of the Nobel Prizes. He wanted 5 prizes. He specified 5 categories of prizes. There was the prize in physics, chemistry, medicine, the prize in literature, and the prize in the Peace Prize. A 6th prize was added later. I'll get to that. Many years, 6 years, some 6 years later, the prize in economics was added. And we'll get to that one. He specified that up to 3 people can share a Nobel Prize. And in fact, last year, 2020, the Nobel Prize in Medicine went to 3 physicians who isolated the virus that causes hepatitis C. But no more than 3 can share the prize. The prize is in today's dollars around $1 million. And that would be shared by the 1, 2, or 3 individuals that won the prize. And not all prizes are awarded every year. They don't have to be awarded every year. They're only awarded when there's a suitable candidate. And another interesting fact is that the Nobel Peace Prize, anyone can nominate an individual for the Nobel Peace Prize. So if you think your neighbor is worthy, you send a letter to the Nobel Foundation and nominate. The other categories, excuse me, the other categories, the nomination comes from select committees. So let's look at the first prize. The first prize was awarded in 1901. This was 5 years after the creation of the prize. It was awarded to Wilhelm Röntgen for the discovery of the X-ray. And the interesting thing about this is that he discovered the X-ray by accident. He was looking at electrical circuits. On his laboratory bench, he had wires, he had tubes, he had batteries. He was studying electrical circuits. And thank you, Janet. Thank you. Many scientific discoveries, believe it or not, are discovered by accident. And this was another example. He found that a photographic film on his laboratory bench was being darkened. and the lights were out in the laboratory. He couldn't figure this out. And he finally realized that one of the tubes that he was running electricity through was producing X-rays. And he called this invisible light because, well, X-rays are high energy light rays. That's why they're able to penetrate. And we know from medical X-rays, remember they used to use medical X-rays, used to be produced on film. X-rays darken the film. So that happened in his laboratory, and he called them X-rays because in science, X marks the unknown. And he called them, these were the unknown rays, the invisible light. There was only one prize awarded in 1901, and it went to Wilhelm Röntgen for his discovery of X-rays. Before I forget, the quote that I gave you, I'll take the vice and you take the woe, was spoken by the next Nobel laureate that I'll mention, Andy. There he is, Winston Churchill. What did he get the Nobel Prize in? And if you know the answer, don't raise your hand. I'll reveal that in a minute. We all know Winston Churchill. He was an amazing individual. He started out as a naval officer in the First World War. There he is in his Navy uniform, British Navy. And he had a mixed record in the First World War. He had a wonderful strategy that he came up with for England to attack Turkey and cross Turkey and hook up with the Russians, who were the British allies in World War I, and surround Germany. And it was a good plan, but it failed miserably. The attack on Turkey happened at the Battle of Gallipoli. Many of you students of history will know what happened at Gallipoli. The British were defeated in their attack on Turkey. And it was failures in the Navy, failures in the Army. There were many failures, probably not due to Churchill, but they say that you learn more by your failures than by your successes. And I think Churchill learned from this failure at Gallipoli. After the First World War, he went back to England, ran for Parliament. We have a picture of him in 1899. There he is, Winnie. He was elected to Parliament, and as we know, he proved to be an incredible politician. He became the Prime Minister. He went on after that. If that wasn't enough, one thing I learned was that he wasn't the first Prime Minister Churchill. His grandfather was Prime Minister of England years before him. There were two Prime Minister Churchills. After that, he went on to be an accomplished artist. A painting of his recently sold for $11.5 million. And he was an author. He wrote books on military history. He wrote a 4-volume history of the English-speaking people. So what category did he win in? And there's the answer. He won the Literature Prize in 1953. And I think a lot of that was due to his oratory. I mean, he was an amazing speaker, and his speeches were a huge factor in being awarded the Nobel in literature. There's another very interesting character, that gentleman that won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and we can have the next slide. We'll see who that is. Albert Camus won the Literature Prize in '57. And if you've taken an English high school class or a college English literature class, you probably read Camus. I think I was assigned The Stranger in high school, one of his novels. But beyond his writing, he had an amazing story. He was born in the Middle East, Syria, I believe, and went to France to study at university in Paris. He was in Paris when the Second World War broke out. He was in Paris when the Germans invaded and occupied Paris. And what he did as a young man was he joined the French resistance at much risk to his life and limb. Besides interrupting rail lines and burning down German warehouses, the resistance published a newspaper. And Albert Camus was the editor of this paper, Le Combat. The word combat is the same in English and French. Again, at great risk to his life. Several people that were associated with this newspaper were killed. One in particular was a man by the name of André Bollier, who was the printer who printed Le Combat. He was apprehended by the Germans on several occasions and did not end well. On the last occasion, he was carrying incriminating documents. He knew that if he was caught, he would end up in front of a firing squad. So he pulled out a pistol. He tried to fight it out with the German soldiers, and they wounded him. And rather than be captured, he turned the gun on himself. So this was the life of Albert Camus in the 1940s. He worked with another French resistance fighter by the name of Jacques Monod. Now, Jacques Monod is not a well-known name in the US, but became a household name in France. He was a biologist, and after the war went back to biology. And Jacques Monod won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1965. So two freedom fighters that risked their lives during World War II both went on to win the Nobel. So let's get back to the early prizes now and look at the 1903 prize in physics, which was there. Madame Curie, Marie Curie, won the Nobel in physics for her, and she shared the prize with her husband, Pierre. They discovered two new elements, radium and polonium, and she named polonium, the element polonium, after her native Poland. When I looked for a photograph of Pierre Curie on the internet, this is what I found. It's the same photograph. Unfortunately, well, poor Pierre was cut out of the photograph. If we go back to the first one, Andy, we'll see on the upper right-hand corner, you can see his face was scrubbed out of the photo. But that's not to take anything away from Marie Curie. One more thing, Pierre Curie was killed in an accident, a street accident in Paris in 1906, 3 years after the award, unfortunately. So he didn't live to see. In 1911, Marie Curie won a second Nobel Prize, and this time in chemistry. She won 2 prizes in 2 different categories, a very rare event. The only other person I can think of that did that was Linus Pauling. He won in chemistry and then later years won the Nobel Peace Prize. So there may have been others, but it's a very rare event. It was accomplished by Marie Curie. Another thing to note, this was 2 years after the first prize in 1901. 2 years later, they awarded it to a woman. So it did not take the Nobel Foundation long to recognize women in science. So she won 2 Nobel Prizes. Her family, she and Pierre had 2 daughters. If we can go to that slide, there it is. Eve on the left and Irene on the right, and they have an interesting story too. Irene followed her parents' footsteps into science. She became a chemist. And she and her husband, in the next photograph, you'll see them. Her husband's name was Frederick Joliot, and Irene. They too won a Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1935. 3 members of the same family. What happened to Eve, her sister? Well, Eve became an author, and she wrote a very well-received biography of her parents, the Curies, which was made into a movie. And Eve once said, "I'm the only member of my family that has not won a Nobel Prize." She had a way of turning a phrase. We have another European I want to tell a little story about. There he is, John Boyd Orr. He was born in Scotland, physician, doctor. He served in World War I, like Churchill. Orr was a medical officer, highly decorated in the British Army as a medical officer. And at some point in his career, he served in India and became interested in combating hunger. And that became, after the First World War, that became his passion. He worked in that area for many years, successfully. And when the United Nations was formed after World War II, he was made head of the Food and Agriculture Program, which was the UN's program for fighting hunger. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1949. And he's, in this photograph, he's pictured on a British stamp. So let me switch now and tell you about the Nobel Prize in Economics. We see the next slide. There it is. This was added in 1969, and there's a story about how this got to be added to the original five prizes. The original five, remember, is physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and the Peace Prize. And this came about because the Royal Bank of Sweden approached the Nobel Foundation and said, we think there should be a prize in economic science. And of course, these guys were all economists, so you know where they're coming from. And the Nobel Foundation considered that, and the bankers said, well, you know, we'll get the Swedish Academy of Sciences to award the economics prize, to select the nominees and award the prize in economics. And the Nobel Foundation considered that. And the banker said, well, further, we'll fund the prize. We'll pay for the prize. And the Nobel Foundation said, okay. So in 1969, the first prize in economics was awarded. It was shared by two European economists. My favorite economist won the 97 prize the 76 prize in economics. Let's see that. That's with Milton Friedman. He was awarded the prize for his work in markets, how markets operate, particularly how free markets operate. He was fond of explaining that when two business people get together to transact business, party A gets what they want, party B gets what they want, and it's a win-win situation. If either party doesn't get what they want, nothing happens. I have a quotation from Milton Friedman that I'm fond of thinking about. He said, it's a mistake to judge programs by their intentions rather than by the results. Dr. Friedman wanted to see the results. He wanted to see the data. He was a data-driven scientist, which is what you have to be. Economics Prize in 1976. A couple of other winners. The prize was shared in 1997 by these two economists, Myron Scholes and Robert Merton, for their work on derivatives. Well, what are derivatives? Derivatives are an investment vehicle that's used on Wall Street, and that's about the best that I can explain it, not being an economist. These two explained it very well, and for their efforts, they were awarded the prize in economics in 97. Their day job was with a mutual fund called Long-Term Capital Management, which was a powerhouse mutual fund on Wall Street. Long-Term Capital Management. And if you wanted to invest in that fund, there was the salesman would tell you there's a $10 million minimum. So if anybody that's listening wants to invest with this fund, be warned, you're going to need 10 million. And the second thing the salesman would tell you is that we have two Nobel laureates on our board of directors, Scholes and Merton. Nothing can go wrong. Well, that wasn't quite true. In 1998, a year after the award of the prize, Long-Term Capital Management managed to lose $4.6 billion in 4 months. They lost over $1 billion a month when the market turned against them. And to say that this sent shockwaves through Wall Street was the understatement of 1998. There was a book, if you want all the details, I'll show you a book that was written about this. It was called When Genius Failed, The Rise and Fall of Long-Term Capital Management. I think the lesson here is that just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at everything. So this was kind of a miss for the Nobel Foundation in one sense. Other misses, I have to mention the 1994 Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Yitzhak Rabin, Yasser Arafat, and Menachem Begin for their work towards peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That was 1994. They were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, but peace didn't follow. There was still quite a bit of violence in the Middle East. And that award was controversial from the standpoint of Yasser Arafat's history of violence. And I mention this because a member of the selection committee resigned from the Nobel Foundation when this prize was awarded. So maybe another miss. 1990 Peace Prize again went to Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Prime Minister, for his improvement in East-West relations. He may have improved East-West relations, but things did not improve in Russia, in the Soviet Union. I mean, today Russia's in the midst of invading Ukraine. So I think what's happening here is that the Peace Prize sometimes is awarded with the hope of peace rather than the accomplishment of peace. Sometimes it's a popularity contest. Well, I don't want to end on a negative note. Let's end on a positive note. To go back to the Economics Prize in 1994, we can see in the next slide who won in 1994. John Nash, an economist. His work was with game theory and competition. And I'm not going to tell the whole story for John Nash. First of all, I'm just about out of time. And second of all, the story is told in the movie, A Beautiful Mind. If you remember seeing that movie, many of us enjoyed that movie. It tells the story of how John Nash overcame mental illness and ended up winning the prize in 1994. And I highly recommend the movie. So I'll close with, by saying that reading about and studying these amazing people that were winners of the Nobel Prize was really a humbling experience. And it was an uplifting experience to see that we have these people in our midst that have truly amazing stories and truly they have success in one area by winning the Nobel Prize. But if you look at their lives, they have success in many areas. These are amazing human beings, and it was a pleasure to learn about them and share it with you. And I've enjoyed doing that. Janet, I'll turn it back to you.